The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, slick with rain from the mailbox, its wax seal unbroken like a scar waiting to split open. Paisley Whitaker's hands trembled as she tore it free, the lawyer's letter spilling truths she'd buried deeper than her mother's grave. Juniper wasn't hers by blood, but by the desperate pact of a woman long gone, her ex-lover Beatrice, who had whispered promises in the dark before vanishing into the marsh like a ghost. And now, 20 years later, as thunder cracked the sky over Monroe, Georgia, Paisley stared at the words that could unravel everything, wondering if the girl she had rocked through fevers and heartbreaks would ever forgive her for loving her mother first. In the dim kitchen light, the scent of cornbread cooling on the sill mingled with the metallic tang of regret, and Paisley sank into the cane-back chair that had witnessed too many unspoken confessions. Juniper would be home from the community college in Savannah soon, her laughter usually filling the hollows of this old house like sunlight through cracked shutters, but tonight Paisley dreaded the sound. How do you tell a daughter forged from your own sacrifices that her very existence was born from a love society deemed a sin? A fleeting rebellion against the ironclad expectations of bloodlines and legacies in this town where the river ran thick with old grudges. Paisley had always known the fragility of secrets in Monroe, where the live oaks bowed under their own weight of Spanish moss, and every porch swing creaked with the rhythm of gossip passed down like heirlooms. The town clung to the edges of the Altamaha River, a place where the humid air carried the faint rot of forgotten plantations and the sharper bite of new subdivisions carving up the wetlands for McMansions owned by Atlanta transplants who pretended not to notice the help. Paisley Whitaker, born and raised in the shadow of the Whitaker cotton fields that had gone fallow after her daddy's heart gave out in '98, had learned early that survival meant blending into the magnolias, pretty enough to admire, unassuming enough not to question. At 22, fresh out of the local beauty school with dreams bigger than her clipper shears could cut, Paisley had taken a job at the Langston estate up on Cypress Hill. The Langstons were old money, the kind that traced back to blockade runners during the war, their white-columned mansion perched like a crown on the bluff overlooking the river's lazy bend. Beatrice Langston, the only daughter, was the jewel in that tarnished setting. 25, sharp as a switchblade hidden in silk, with a laugh that could coax fireflies out of dusk. They met in the herb garden behind the kitchens, Paisley trimming rosemary for the cook while Beatrice sketched wild irises in her leather-bound journal, her fingers smudged with charcoal and the faint perfume of tuberose. It started innocently enough, or so Paisley told herself in the quiet hours before dawn. A shared cigarette behind the carriage house, the smoke curling like questions neither dared voice. Beatrice's marriage to Harlan Crow, the banker from Savannah, had been arranged like a contract for heirloom seeds, practical, predictable, meant to bloom into stability. But Harlan's touches were cold ledgers, his expectations a ledger of debts unpaid, and Beatrice's eyes sought warmth in the shadows where Paisley moved like a secret. One evening as cicadas hummed their endless dirge, Beatrice pulled Paisley into the potting shed, the air thick with potting soil and desperation. Their lips met in a collision of hunger and heresy, hands fumbling with buttons and fears. In that dim space lit only by a sliver of moon through the slats, Paisley tasted freedom for the first time. Salty, forbidden, alive. They stole moments like thieves. Afternoons in the attic amid dusty trunks of Confederate lace, nights driving Beatrice's old Ford out to the oyster beds where the tide erased their footprints. Beatrice spoke of escaping to New Orleans, of opening a gallery for her paintings, of a life where love wasn't measured by dowries or daddy's approval. Paisley dreamed alongside her, her callous fingers tracing the curve of Beatrice's collarbone, whispering promises she had no right to make. But Monroe didn't yield its daughters easily. Harlan's family owned half the banks in the county, and Beatrice's father, Senator Elias Langston, held court at the Elks Club with stories of preserving Southern values that masked the rot beneath. Whispers started when Beatrice's absences grew longer, her smiles too radiant for a woman bound to a man who preferred golf over grace. Paisley felt the eyes first, the cook's sidelong glances, the groundskeeper's knowing nod. Then came the letters, anonymous and venomous, slipped under the Whitaker cabin door. Unnatural. Abomination. Leave before the river claims you. Beatrice discovered she was pregnant 6 months into their stolen summer. The tests strip a cruel asterisk to their reverie. Harlan, ever the accountant, claimed paternity without question. his pride swelling like the river in spring flood. Beatrice confessed to Paisley in tears on the riverbank, the water lapping at their bare feet like accusations. "It's his," she said, voice breaking on the lie they both knew was half-truth. Harlan's seed perhaps from dutiful nights, but the child a symbol of the cage closing tighter. Paisley held her then, rocking her as if she could absorb the pain through her skin, murmuring that they would find a way, that love like theirs could bend the world if they pushed hard enough. The end came swift as a nor'easter. Senator Langston intercepted one of Beatrice's sketches, a tender portrait of Paisley hidden in her vanity, the lines too intimate for coincidence. He confronted her in the parlor, his voice a thunderclap that echoed through the halls. Harlan was summoned, his face paling not from betrayal but from the scandal's shadow on his ledgers. Beatrice, cornered, chose flight over fight, slipping away at midnight in that same Ford. A hastily packed valise and a note pinned to the nursery blueprint. "Forgive me. Raise her with the kindness I couldn't give. She's yours in every way that matters. B." The child arrived 3 weeks later, premature and wailing, in a Macon hospital under Beatrice's assumed name. She named her Juniper, after the berries that thrived in the sandy soil near the river, resilient against salt and storm. But Beatrice never held her long. Fever took her in the night, pneumonia from the damp drive north, or so the coroner's report claimed when it trickled back to Monroe months later, sanitized for the obituary. Paisley, piecing together the fragments from a Charleston nurse Beatrice had trusted, drove through the night to claim the tiny bundle, her heart a hollow drum echoing with loss. Juniper came home to the Whitaker place, a sagging Victorian on the town's edge where the pavement gave way to gravel and the river's murmur was lullaby. Paisley quit the Langston job that week, her severance a hush-money envelope thick as guilt. She took in sewing for the church ladies, mending hems and hearts with equal discretion, and poured every spare stitch into raising the girl who looked nothing like her but felt like home. Juniper's eyes were Beatrice's, storm gray, flecked with gold like river silt, and her laugh, oh God, her laugh could summon fireflies still. The years blurred into a rhythm of scraped knees and school plays, of Juniper's small hand in Paisley's as they walked the levee at sunset, skipping stones into the current. Paisley taught her to bait hooks for catfish, to weave sweetgrass baskets from the marsh elders, to question the Sunday sermons that preached love but doled it out in measures. She never spoke of Beatrice, not directly. The story was a fairy tale of a mama lost to the stars, watching over them from the big house in the sky. Juniper called her Mama P at first, then simply Mom, the word wrapping around Paisley's soul like kudzu, choking out the thorns of what-ifs. Monroe, for its part, accepted the arrangement with the grace of selective blindness. The Langstons, humiliated by Beatrice's tragic passing, disowned the child publicly but sent checks quarterly, blood money for silence, Paisley called it in her darker moods. Harlan Crow remarried a debutante from Augusta, siring legitimate heirs who played lacrosse at Vanderbilt, and the town murmured that Paisley was good with strays, a backhanded kindness that kept the roof patched. But undercurrents ran deep. At the Piggly Wiggly, old biddies like Mrs. Hargrove would pat Juniper's head and sigh, "Poor lamb, no mama of her own," their eyes sliding to Paisley with the weight of unspoken sins. By the time Juniper turned 18, the world had cracked open wider. She enrolled at the Savannah College of Art and Design, majoring in graphic novels, her sketchbooks filled with fierce heroines who toppled empires with a single line. Paisley watched her bloom, pride swelling like the river at full moon, but worry gnawed at the edges. Juniper had Beatrice's fire, and in Monroe fire drew storms. The girl had come out as gay during her junior year, casual as announcing a new recipe, over peach cobbler on the back stoop. "Mom, I like girls," she'd said, chin lifted like a challenge. Paisley had pulled her into a hug, whispering, "Then like them fierce, baby. The world's got enough cowards." But the world pushed back. Juniper's first girlfriend, a barista named Riley from the college town, lasted 3 months before her daddy's shotgun diplomacy ended it. Less bullets, more Bible verses delivered via certified mail. Juniper came home bruised in spirit, her drawings turning jagged with rage. Paisley held her through the nights, brewing chamomile tea strong as resolve, vowing silently to shield this child from the gales that had claimed her mother. Now at 20, Juniper was testing wings stronger than Paisley's ever dared. She had a new flame, a poet named Lark from Oregon, all tattoos and terrycloth robes, visiting for the summer on a fellowship grant. They met at a reading in Tybee Island, Lark's verses about salt-kissed lovers stirring something in Juniper that Paisley recognized too well, the pull toward the untamed. The house filled with their whispers and laughter, Lark's voice a soft lilt against the Georgia drawl, and Paisley found herself smiling over breakfasts of grits and greens, the envelope from the lawyer forgotten in her apron pocket like a bad dream. Until it wasn't. The letter, penned by Elias Langston's estate attorney now that the senator lay cold in the family vault, demanded DNA confirmation for inheritance claims. Juniper, it turned out, stood to inherit Cypress Hill outright. No strings, no Harlan interlopers, provided she proved blood ties and upheld family traditions. The words twisted like briars. Beatrice's sole issue, raised in absentia, now eligible for restitution. Paisley read it twice, her pulse a drumbeat in her ears, before crumpling it into the wood stove. But ashes don't erase ink from memory. That evening, as rain sheeted the windows and Lark strummed folk tunes on the guitar in the parlor, Juniper burst through the door soaked and radiant, a canvas bag slung over her shoulder bulging with art supplies. "Mom, you won't believe the light on the marsh today. Lark and I drove out to the point, and it's like the whole world's underwater gold." She dropped the bag, kicking off boots caked in mud, and wrapped Paisley in a hug that smelled of salt and possibility. Paisley held on a beat too long, breathing in the girl who was hers in every fracture of her heart. "Sounds like magic, Junie," she murmured, voice steady as the oak out front. But inside the storm brewed, questions coiling like the river's undercurrent. How long before the past resurfaced, dragging them both under? And what would Juniper see when she looked at her mom through the lens of betrayal? Not just blood, but the love that had birthed her into secrecy. The fire popped in the grate, casting shadows that danced like specters on the walls, and Paisley wondered if some truths were better left to the tide. Dawn broke over Monroe with the reluctance of a debtor, gray light seeping through the lace curtains like smoke from a dying ember. Paisley rose before the roosters, her joints protesting the chill that lingered even in July, and slipped into the kitchen to start the coffee. The percolator gurgled like an old friend, filling the air with bitter comfort, and she measured out oats for porridge, her mind a whirlpool circling the letter's demands. Inheritance. Traditions. Words that in Langston parlance meant chains disguised as crowns. Juniper and Lark slept tangled in the guest room upstairs, their murmurs filtering down like half-remembered dreams. Paisley envied their ease, the way young love defied gravity, unburdened by the ledgers of loss. At 42, her own heart was a map of faded roads, Beatrice the widest highway veering into dead ends, with detours marked by fleeting affairs in Savannah bars where women with city edges pretended Monroe was just a story. There had been Tessa, the divorcee from the library, whose kisses tasted of chamomile but whose fears ran deeper than the river. And before her, quiet lunches with Maeve, the potter from the co-op, whose hands shaped clay but couldn't mold Paisley's solitude. None stuck, because none could fill the hollow Beatrice had carved. Paisley had learned to live around it, like a tree growing crooked around a fence post, her days stitched with routine, mending for the quilting circle, volunteering at the food pantry where folks like her, widows, strays, the quietly queer, gathered without judgment. But Juniper's presence anchored her, a living bridge between what was and what might be. To risk that now, with the Langstons' ghost rattling chains. The stairs creaked and Lark appeared first, hair a wild halo, clad in Juniper's oversized flannel. "Morning, Paisley. Coffee's a godsend. Oregon rains don't prepare you for this steam bath humidity." Her smile was easy, tattoos peeking like secrets from her sleeves. A compass rose on one wrist, a line of poetry on the other. "What is the body but a river?" Paisley poured her a mug, black as midnight, and nodded toward the porch. "Sit. World's kinder out there before the heat rises." They rocked in companionable silence, the swing's chains groaning softly, while mist rose from the yard like spirits fleeing the sun. Lark sipped, then ventured. "Juniper talks about you like you're the North Star. Says you taught her to see stories in everything, the way the moss hangs like veils, or the heron stands sentinel." Paisley chuckled, low and warm, but it caught on the lump in her throat. "She's the storyteller. I just hold the lantern." Upstairs, Juniper stirred, her footsteps a familiar patter that quickened Paisley's pulse. She bounded down, cheeks flushed from sleep, and draped herself over Lark's shoulders for a lazy kiss that lingered just long enough to make Paisley avert her eyes, a flush of protectiveness warming her chest. Not jealousy, never that, but a fierce guardianship, born from watching Beatrice's light dim under similar gazes. "What's the plan today?" Juniper asked, stealing a sip from Lark's mug. "Gallery crawl in Savannah? Or should we hit the flea market for junk to inspire your next poem?" Lark grinned, tracing Juniper's knuckles. "Your call, Firefly. But first, breakfast. Paisley's oats are legendary." They ate at the scarred oak table, laughter bubbling over bowls and bacon, stories weaving between bites. Lark's latest reading where a heckler quoted Leviticus, Juniper's sketch of a mermaid haunting the river's ghosts. Paisley listened, her smiles genuine but edged with the envelope's shadow, tucked now in her Bible on the mantel like a forbidden verse. After, the girls piled into Juniper's battered pickup, bound for the city, windows down to let the wind whip their hair. Paisley waved from the steps, her hand lingering in the air until the truck vanished around the bend, swallowed by live oaks. Alone, the house pressed in, its walls whispering memories. The nursery she painted sky blue for Juniper's arrival, the attic trunk where Beatrice's last letter yellowed unread. She fetched the envelope, smoothing its creases, and sat at the desk by the window, pen hovering over stationery. "Dear Elias's lawyer, or whoever pulls the strings now," she began, then scratched it out. Too sharp. Instead, "I've raised Juniper these 20 years with the love Beatrice intended. She's thrived here, on this land that's seen more heart than Cypress Hill ever held. Inheritance won't change that, but dragging up ghosts might break what's whole. Let her choose her path as her mama did." She sealed it, address copied from the letter, and drove to the post office in town, the road winding past fields where cotton bolls burst like accusations. At the counter, old Mr. Thibodeau stamped it with deliberate slowness, his eyes narrowing behind bifocals. "Langston matter, eh? Been a spell since that name stirred the pot." Paisley met his gaze, steady as the river. "Some pot's best left cooling, Earl." Back home, she busied herself in the garden, pulling weeds that strangled the heirloom tomatoes, their vines heavy with promise. Sweat beaded on her brow, mixing with the salt of unshed tears, and she thought of Beatrice's hands in the soil, planting bulbs that bloomed defiant against frost. How had it come to this, defending a life built on half-truths, while the town that judged her sipped sweet tea on verandas built by hands like hers? The phone rang as dusk fell, a shrill interruption to the cricket's chorus. Juniper's voice tumbled out, breathless and bright. "Mom, we found this amazing print shop. Lark's reading tonight, you should come. It's at that warehouse on the riverfront." Paisley hesitated, the drive an hour each way, fatigue tugging like an undertow. But Juniper's plea, "Please? For me," was a hook she couldn't shake. "I'll be there, baby. Save me a seat." The drive to Savannah was a blur of headlights and heartbeats, the highway flanked by marshes that glowed silver under the moon. Paisley parked amid the Arts District's bustle, where galleries spilled light onto cobblestones and the air hummed with possibility. The warehouse thrummed with bodies, tattooed 20-somethings nursing IPAs, professors in linen debating form over function. Juniper waved from the front row, her face alight, Lark beside her tuning a guitar strung with dreams. Lark took the stage, spotlights carving her into myth, and her voice unfurled like smoke. Poems of lovers lost to currents, of bodies mapping uncharted shores. Juniper leaned into Paisley, whispering, "She's magic, isn't she?" Paisley nodded, throat tight, the words echoing Beatrice's whispers in the potting shed. When Lark finished to thunderous snaps, Juniper pulled her up for an encore hug, and in that crush of bodies, Paisley slipped away to the bar for water, her reflection in the mirrored shelf fractured and fleeting. Outside, on the loading dock overlooking the dark ribbon of the Savannah, she lit a rare cigarette, the ember a small rebellion. Footsteps approached, Juniper alone, her silhouette soft against the city glow. "You okay, Mom? You seemed distant." Paisley exhaled, smoke veiling her face. "Just old bones, Junie. Tired from the day." Juniper sat beside her, legs swinging over the edge, the drop to the water a whisper below. "Lark makes me feel like I could jump and fly." Like nothing could touch us. She paused, turning those storm-gray eyes on Paisley. You ever feel that? With someone? The question hung, heavy as humidity, and Paisley saw Beatrice in the tilt of Juniper's head, the curve of her hope. Once, she said softly, the truth a stone smoothed by time. It was like breathing underwater, beautiful. But you know you'll have to surface eventually. Juniper nodded, wise beyond her years, and laid her head on Paisley's shoulder. Then teach me how to swim, Mom. So I don't drown. They stayed like that until Lark called them back inside, the night folding around them like a promise. But as Paisley drove home alone, the radio crooning Patsy Cline's laments, the envelope's ghost rode shotgun, whispering of floods to come. In Monroe, choices weren't free. They were tributaries feeding the same muddy river. And Juniper, her fierce girl, was about to learn how deep it ran. That night, sleep evaded Paisley, the ceiling fan stirring air thick with foreboding. She rose to check the locks, pausing at Juniper's door where a sketch taped to the frame caught the hall light. Two women entwined in a hammock under stars, labeled Mom and Me forever. Paisley's chest ached with the weight of it. Love's purest lie or its truest truth. The river outside murmured its ancient counsel, but answers came slow as dawn, and the storm was only gathering. The letter's reply arrived swifter than Paisley anticipated. A crisp manila packet left on the porch like an offering to appease restless ancestors. She found it at noon, returning from the farmer's market with arms full of okra and heirloom peaches, their fuzz soft as forgotten caresses. The return address, Langston and Associates, Savannah, stung like wasp venom, and she retreated to the sunroom, where dust motes danced in shafts of light like confetti from a funeral. Inside, clinical pages outlined the terms. A trust fund seated in the 90s, ballooned by investments to 7 figures, the Cypress Hill deed, contingent on residency and alignment with family ethos. Alignment, a euphemism for the Langston Creed. Etched in marble at the family crypt, honor. Heritage, heterodoxy unspoken. A DNA kit nestled in the folds, swab and vial gleaming under the plastic wrap, with instructions precise as a surgeon's incision. For verification purposes. Discrete processing. Results binding. Paisley's fingers traced the lab's logo, a helix twisting like kudzu on a fence. She thought of Beatrice's journal, smuggled home after the funeral, its pages a mosaic of their love. Pressed wildflowers, charcoal nudes that blurred the line between portrait and prayer. Juniper had found it once at 12, mistaking it for a fairy tale book, her questions met with Paisley's deflection. Just stories, baby, from a time before you. Now the truth loomed, a flood wall cracking under pressure. Juniper and Lark returned that afternoon, tanned and tangled from a day at the beach, sand still gritting their laughter. They tumbled into the kitchen, Lark bearing a bottle of Oregon Pinot, Juniper a bouquet of sea oats pilfered from the dunes. To toasts, Juniper declared, popping the cork with theatrical flair, the fizz mirroring the effervescence in her eyes. Paisley forced a smile, setting out glasses etched with her mother's initials, the wine's legs running red as regret. They clinked amid chatter, Lark's grant extension through fall, Juniper's internship at a design firm in the city, hints of a shared apartment in Portland where rain would wash away southern stains. Paisley sipped sparingly, the tannins bitter on her tongue, while the envelope burned a hole in her apron pocket. Dinner stretched long. Shrimp étouffée simmered with cayenne from the garden, cornbread crumbling warm, stories looping like vines. But as Lark recounted a narrow escape from a homophobic barista in her hometown, Juniper's hand tightening on Paisley's under the table, the words slipped free. Junie, there's something from the Langstons. The room stilled, forks hovering, the fans were suddenly loud as judgment. Juniper's face shifted, curiosity sharpening to caution, gray eyes narrowing like storm clouds gathering. Grandpa Elias's people? What, another check with strings? Lark glanced between them, sensing the rift, but Paisley pressed on, sliding the packet across the oilcloth. Not just money. The house. And proof you're theirs. Juniper tore it open, pages rustling like dry leaves in wind, her lips moving silently over legalese. Lark read over her shoulder, brow furrowing while Paisley watched, heart a snare drum. When Juniper looked up, her voice was even, laced with the steel Paisley had forged in her. DNA? Like I'm some disputed fence line? Mom, what is this really about? The question cracked open the dam. Paisley drew a breath, tasting salt, tears, or sea air she couldn't tell. It's about your mama, baby. Beatrice. She left you with me because she couldn't stay. Because Monroe, this place, it chews up dreams like hers and spits out bones. Juniper leaned forward, wine forgotten. I know the stories. The accident, the fever. But this feels like they're claiming me now, after ignoring me for 20 years. Lark's hand found Juniper's, a quiet anchor, but Paisley saw the fracture lines spreading. They ignored you because of me, she confessed, voice threading thin. Beatrice and I. We were more than friends. In a time when that meant exile. She married Harlan to keep peace, but her heart was wilder. When she found out about you, she ran, to protect you from the cage she was born in. Died trying to give you freedom. The words hung, heavy as humidity before rain, and Juniper's face crumpled. Not in anger but in the slow seep of betrayal's ink. You loved her. My real mom. And you never said. It wasn't accusation, but the wound was there, raw and red. Paisley reached across, but Juniper pulled back, standing abrupt. I need air. The screen door slammed, her footsteps fading to the river path. Lark murmuring apologies as she followed. Paisley sat alone, the wine turning to vinegar in her glass, the fan stirring ghosts. She had braced for fury, for questions sharp as shears, but this quiet unraveling cut deeper. Hours ticked by, the house settling into creaks, until headlights swept the drive. Lark's rental, Juniper in the passenger seat, eyes puffy but resolute. They didn't speak of it that night, crashing early with excuses of exhaustion, but the air thickened, charged like the sky before lightning. Morning brought uneasy truce. Juniper sketched at the breakfast table, lines fierce and fragmented, while Lark brewed tea with forced cheer. Paisley mended a curtain, needle pricking her thumb, a bead of blood blooming like a secret spilled. I'm sorry, Junie, she said finally, thread snapping. Juniper looked up, pencil pausing. For what? Loving her? Or hiding it? Paisley met her gaze, unflinching. Both. But mostly for letting fear stitch my mouth shut. Juniper nodded, slow, the motion a bridge half-built. I get it, Mom. This town. It's a pressure cooker. But I'm not a kid anymore. I need the whole story, not fairy tales. They talked then, halting at first, words tumbling like stones into the river. Beatrice's sketches, the potting shed trysts, the night she drove away with Juniper bundled in her arms. Paisley spared the rawest edges, the venomous letters, the town's turned backs, but shared enough to map the terrain. By noon, Juniper swabbed her cheek, the vial sealing with a click-like finality. Let's send it. See what empire crumbles. Lark drove it to the post the next day, while Juniper and Paisley walked the levee, the river high from upstream rains, banks slick with mud. You think they'll want me back? Juniper asked, skipping a flat stone that kissed the surface thrice before sinking. Paisley linked arms, the gesture old as their bond. They'll want the name. But you're Whitaker through and through, stubborn as marsh grass. Relief flickered, fragile as firefly glow. But the undercurrent pulled. That week, Senator Langston's widow, Beatrice's mother, Evelyn, called, her voice a porcelain crackle over the line. Paisley Whitaker? I never thought you'd answer. Courtesy of the 90s, laced with the chill of high society frost. Juniper's results confirm it. We're arranging a visit to Cypress Hill. Family matters, you understand. Paisley gripped the receiver, knuckles whitening. She's family here first, Mrs. Langston. Whatever matters you got, they wait on her say. The line went dead, but the echo lingered. Juniper, overhearing from the hall, paled. A visit? Like I'm some prodigal debutante. Fear threaded her voice, the poet's confidence cracking. Lark, packing for a reading in Atlanta, hugged her fierce. Go if you want or burn the invite. Your call, love. But Juniper's eyes sought Paisley, pleading for the map she'd hidden too long. They drove to Cypress Hill 2 days later, the mansion looming like a dowager on the bluff, columns fluted white against thunderheads. Evelyn waited on the veranda, pearls clutched like rosaries, her face a mask of practiced grief. Harlan Crow stood beside, graying but stiff, his legitimate sons absent. Off at prep school, no doubt. Juniper stepped from the truck, chin high, Paisley a shadow at her elbow. The tour was a mausoleum walk. Grand hall with portraits of stern Langstons glaring down, library shelves groaning under tomes of heritage, the nursery where Beatrice had paced with infant cries. Evelyn's narratives dripped honeyed venom. Your mother was willful, dear, but blood calls. While Harlan droned of trusts and trustees. Juniper absorbed it, questions sparse, her hand brushing Paisley's in the conservatory amid Beatrice's wild irises, now tamed to boarders. At dusk, as they prepared to leave, Evelyn cornered Paisley in the foyer, voice low. You've done well keeping her unspoiled. But she's Langston now. That life you gave her, it's charity. Time to collect. Paisley straightened, the old fire kindling. Charity? I gave her roots, Evelyn. You gave her silence. Choose your debts wisely. Outside, Juniper exhaled, the river wind whipping her hair. It's beautiful, but it's a cage. Like Mom Beatrice always said in your stories. Paisley nodded, throat tight. She broke free. You can too. But as they drove away, Cypress Hill shrinking in the rearview, Juniper's silence deepened. The DNA's truth, a seed sprouting thorns. That night, over gumbo simmered slow, Juniper voiced the fracture. If I'm theirs, who am I to you? Paisley set down her spoon, reaching across the steam. Mine. Always. Blood's just ink. The story's what writes us. Tears fell then, hot and healing, Lark's hand bridging them. But in the quiet after, Paisley lay awake, the river's roar a warning. Truths unearthed stirred mud, and not all that rose would settle clean. The storm broke next morning, rain lashing the roof like accusations, and with it came the first betrayal's whisper. A call from Harlan, offering Juniper a fresh start in Savannah, away from complications. The word hung, laced with the town's old prejudices, and Juniper's resolve hardened like clay in kiln. But the pull was there, tidal and treacherous, threatening to drag them into depths neither could swim alone. Monroe simmered under August's yoke, the air a stew of pine sap and prejudice, thick enough to chew. Paisley felt it closing in, the town's pulse quickening with the Langston revival, whispers at the diner about the lost lamb returning. Eyes lingering on Juniper in the aisles of the feed store where she picked up sketch pads and seeds. The girl bore it with artist's grace, her drawings turning satirical. Caricatures of powdered ladies in hoop skirts clutching deeds like shields. But privately cracks showed. Sleepless nights pacing the hall, Lark's reassurances fraying at the edges as her fellowship clock ticked. Paisley threw herself into work, taking extra shifts at the pantry, sorting cans of beans and boxes of rice for families hit by mill closures upriver. There, amid the fluorescent hum, she found fleeting solace in Maeve's company. The potter had returned to town after a stint in Asheville, her stall at the market now a fixture, vases glazed in river blues and storm grays. They fell into old rhythms. Shared smokes behind the warehouse, Maeve's fingers dusted in clay tracing Paisley's palm lines. You look haunted, Whitaker, Maeve said one afternoon, her voice a low alto over the clatter of volunteers. Like the river's got your name carved in its bed. Paisley confessed fragments. The letter, the visit, Juniper's teetering world. Maeve listened without pity, her eyes deep as kiln fire. Secrets are like pots, beautiful till they crack. Let me help mend. That evening they drove to Maeve's cabin on the outskirts, a low-slung place of reclaimed wood and wheel-scarred floors. Over cornbread and collards Maeve shared her own scars. A coming out that cost her brother's wedding invite. A lover lost to Atlanta's glitter. Their hands met across the table, tentative as new clay. And when Maeve kissed her slow and sure, Paisley tasted possibility. Earthy, unapologetic. It bloomed quiet, that spark. Mornings with coffee on Maeve's deck overlooking the marsh, where egrets stalked fish like forgotten graces. Afternoons in the studio, Paisley modeling for a bust, her stillness a canvas for Maeve's hands. Juniper noticed, her grin sly over breakfast. Maeve's good for you, Mom. Like you deserve a plot twist. Lark visiting weekends dubbed it the slow burn, teasing with poems about widows and wheels. For a week, normalcy reigned. Picnics by the river, where Juniper read Lark's verses aloud, laughter rippling like minnows. But betrayal brewed upstream. Harlan Crow, sensing opportunity in Juniper's hesitation, escalated. A sleek SUV idling outside the house one dawn, his driver delivering invitations to galas in Savannah, engraved cards promising reintegration. Juniper burned them in the fire pit, flames licking gold, but the smoke carried to town. Mrs. Hargrove cornered Paisley at church, Bible clutched like a gavel. Raising another man's child, admirable, but now it's time for proper station. That girl's too wild for your influence. The pause dripped disdain, the old slur unspoken but sharp. Paisley fired back, voice steel-wrapped silk. Proper? Like your boy who skipped town with the church fund? Juniper's wild like art, Velma. Beautiful because it defies frames. She left the pews early, heart hammering, and drove straight to Maeve's, collapsing into arms that held without question. They made love that afternoon, urgent and undoing. Maeve's body a landscape of curves and calluses, whispers mapping paths Paisley had long forsaken. Afterward, tangled in sheets scented of lavender and loam, Maeve traced the scar on Paisley's rib, from a childhood fall or so she claimed, but really from Beatrice's nails in passion's grip. Stay tonight, Maeve murmured. Let the world wait. But the world intruded at midnight. Juniper's truck roaring up the drive, tires spitting gravel. Paisley dressed hasty, Maeve's kiss a talisman on her lips, and met her girl on the porch, face streaked with rain or tears. Harlan called. Says if I don't come for the reading of the will next week, the trust goes to charity, some anti-everything foundation. Juniper's voice cracked, fists clenched. He knows about Lark, Mom. Said I'd be throwing away legacy for deviancy. Like I'm his to bargain. Rage ignited in Paisley, hot as kiln. That man's legacy is ledgers and lies. You owe him nothing. She pulled Juniper inside, brewing tea strong as resolve, and they talked till stars wheeled overhead, plans half-formed. Contest the will, expose the strings, flee to Portland if need be. Lark arrived at dawn, train tired but fierce, her presence a bulwark. We're a unit, she declared, linking hands in a circle on the rug. No empire gets to rewrite our story. The week blurred into preparation. Paisley consulting a pro bono lawyer in Brunswick, a wiry woman named Delphine who specialized in queer estates, her office stacked with case law like ammunition. Juniper sketched affidavits, her art turning weapon, comics depicting Langstons as vultures in crinoline. Maeve contributed a vase for stress, its form a twisted river, symbol of Ben's survived. Even the town rallied subtly. Mr. Thibodeau slipped Paisley the postmaster's code for expedited filings. The pantry volunteers baked pies laced with encouragement. Yet doubt not. On the eve of the reading, Juniper confessed over the phone from Lark's borrowed loft in the city. What if I want it, Mom? The house, the money, not for them but for us. To build something real. Paisley's heart twisted, pride and fear entwining. Then claim it, baby. But on your terms. No cages. The courthouse in Savannah dawned crisp, fall's first whisper crisping the air. Paisley arrived with Juniper and Lark, Maeve a quiet sentinel at her side, their hands brushing like lifelines. Harlan waited in the oak-paneled room, flanked by Suits and Evelyn's ghost. Her will a codicil to Elias's probated late. The judge, a stern woman with silver streaks, intoned the terms. Cypress Hill to Juniper, trust disbursed quarterly, conditional on disavowal of scandalous associations. Juniper stood, voice clear as river glass. Your Honor, I accept the property, but reject the conditions. My associations are my family, my love, my truth. Scandals in the strings you pull. Gasps rippled. Harlan's face modeled puce. The judge's gavel paused, eyes appraising, then fell with a crack. Noted. Assets transferred unencumbered. Court adjourned. Elation surged as they spilled into the hall, Juniper whooping, Lark spinning her in a waltz down the marble. Paisley hugged Maeve fierce, the victory sweet as stolen fruit. But Harlan cornered them at the doors, voice venom low. You'll regret this, girl. Monroe remembers debts. Juniper met his gaze, unblinking. Then let it. I'm paid in full. They celebrated that night in a riverside bistro. Toasts to freedom bubbling like champagne. Maeve's foot nudged Paisley's under the table. A promise of nights unbound. Juniper sketched the moment on a napkin. For women linked, unbreakable. But as laughter peaked, Paisley's phone buzzed. Anonymous text, a grainy photo of her and Beatrice, young and entwined in the garden, time-stamped from some attic archive. Blood debts collect. Watch your back. The high crashed, reality's undertow pulling. Betrayal wasn't just Harlan's. It was the town's, the past's, woven into the very soil. Driving home under stars pricked like warnings, Paisley gripped the wheel, Maeve's hand on her thigh a steadying force. Juniper from the back murmured, "We fight, Mom. Like you taught." But the photo burned in her pocket, a spark that could ignite the dry tinder of all they'd built. Storm clouds gathered anew, thunder rumbling distant, and Paisley knew the real flood was coming, not of water but of reckonings long dammed. Fall draped Monroe in amber veils, leaves carpeting the roads like warnings trampled underfoot. The photo's shadow lengthened, anonymous texts escalating to letters postmarked from P.O. boxes in town, grainy snapshots of Paisley and Beatrice at the oyster beds, scrawled captions, "Sins of the Mothers," accompanied by Bible verses on abominations. Paisley burned them in the wood stove, ashes swirling up the flue like prayers unanswered. But the poison seeped. Juniper found one slipped under the door, her face draining to ash. "This is war, Mom. Who's fighting?" The town turned inquisitor. At the market stalls whispered. Whitaker's unnatural ways poisoned the Langston girl. Church pews emptied around them, the quilting circle's invitations drying up like creeks in drought. Even allies wavered, Mr. Thibodeau avoiding eye contact, the pantry manager citing budget cuts to sideline Paisley. Maeve's cabin became sanctuary, her wheels hum a counterpoint to the siege, but guilt gnawed. Her presence a target, drawing fire to the woman who'd given Paisley breath after Beatrice. Juniper armored with art, her Savannah internship yielding a zine series, River Ghosts, comics chronicling forbidden loves in southern shade. Beatrice's story veiled but vivid. Lark amplified it online, viral ripples crashing against Monroe's shores. Harlan retaliated through proxies, developers circling Cypress Hill, offers to buy low on distressed property. His son's home for break, cruising past the Whitaker place in Daddy's Cadillac, bass-thumping slurs. One night eggs splattered the truck's windshield, yolks running like tears, a note taped to the bumper. "Go back to the marsh dikes." Paisley cleaned it in the driveway, hose hissing fury, Maeve wielding sponges like swords. "They're scared," Maeve said, suds dripping from her elbows. "Of what you two represent. Love that doesn't kneel." But fear crept in Paisley's bones, old as the river's bends. She dreamed of Beatrice, spectral and white, reaching across floods. "Protect her. Even from me." Waking sweat damp, she checked Juniper's room, the girl's sleep fitful, sketchpad clutched like a shield. The breaking point crested mid-October, harvest moon fat and accusatory. Juniper and Lark hosted a reading at the community center. A fundraiser for the pantry, flyers touting stories from the margins. The hall filled tentative. Outcasts from the co-op, a smattering of college kids, Maeve's Potter friends glazing mugs in the lobby. Paisley manned the door, tickets crisp in her hand, pride swelling as Juniper took the mic, voice steady. "This is for the ghosts who loved loud and the living who still do." Lark followed, poems weaving salt and sinew, then open mic. Voices cracking open like pecans, tales of hidden selves in Bible Belt shadows. Laughter mingled with sniffles, the air electric with catharsis. But as the crowd thinned, tires screeched outside. A pickup bed full of locals, faces twisted in beer-fueled bravado, Harlan's eldest at the wheel. Bottles flew, beer not Molotovs but shattering glass and slurs. "Freaks! Sodom's spawn!" Juniper lunged for the door, Paisley barring her, Maeve dialing 911 with clay-dusted fingers. The melee blurred. Shards underfoot, a bottle grazing Lark's temple, blood beating red. Paisley shoved a heckler back, her seamstress's strength surprising, while Juniper hurled a chair, splintering wood. Sirens wailed distant, scattering the mob, but damage lingered. Cuts needing stitches, the center's windows spiderwebbed. In the ER waiting room, fluorescent harsh, Juniper wept into Paisley's lap. "I wanted to fight clean, Mom. For us." Paisley stroked her hair, voice hoarse. "You did, baby. Dirt's their language, we speak louder." Dawn brought reckonings. Delphine, the lawyer, filed restraining orders, her filings a barrage. The zine went nuclear online, shares spiking with hashtag #SouthernSinsNor. But Harlan struck subterranean. A petition circulated at the Elks, calling for Juniper's rehabilitation. Code for conversion camps, Whispers of custody challenges despite her age. Evelyn, frail but venomous, visited unannounced, teacup trembling in saucer. This spectacle dishonors Beatrice. Come home, child. Leave the influences. Juniper, bandaged but unbowed, laughed bitter. Influences? That's love, Gran. Mama died chasing it, you buried yours. Evelyn paled, retreating to her Cadillac, but the seed lodged. Doubt in Juniper's eyes, a flicker wondering if blood's call was curse or kin. Paisley fractured under the strain. Driving Maeve to the station for a supply run to Macon, she pulled over on the levee, tears hot. I can't lose her to this. Not after Beatrice. Maeve held her fierce. You're not losing, you're teaching survival. But you gotta let go a little, Pious. Love her enough to let her rage. That night, alone in the kitchen, Paisley penned a letter to Juniper. Not for sending but for soul. I raised you from another's womb because my heart claimed you first. If the river takes you north, float free. I'll be the current, not the dam. Climax brewed at Cypress Hill's Harvest Ball. Harlan's ploy to reclaim Juniper publicly. She went, armored in thrift store silk, Lark on arm, Paisley and Maeve trailing as chaperones uninvited. The mansion glowed, chandeliers dripping light like honeyed lies. Guests in seersucker swirling to brass band waltzes. Harlan cornered Juniper on the terrace, voice silk over steel. Sign the addendum, disavow the lifestyle, the woman who poisoned your cradle. Or lose it all. Juniper's laugh rang, drawing eyes. Addendum? That's your love, contracts in closets. Mama broke free. I'm flying farther. She kissed Lark then, deliberate, moonlit and unashamed, gasps rippling through French doors. Harlan lunged, Paisley intercepting, her shove toppling him into hydrangeas. Chaos erupted. Guests scattering, Evelyn fainting, theatrical, security swarming. In the fray a figure emerged. Riley, Juniper's ex, now a reporter for the Savannah Morning News, camera flashing truths. Harlan Crow assaults heir at family gala. Details at 11. The story broke viral, exposing the petition, the threats, the photo source from Langston Addicts. Monroe reeled, editorials questioning heritage in a new light. But victory's costs cut deep. Juniper collapsed post-ball, fever spiking from stress, hospitalized with pneumonia, echo of Beatrice's end. Paisley sat vigil, Maeve rotating shifts with Lark, machines beeping like accusations. In delirium, Juniper murmured, Mom, don't leave like her. Paisley wept, holding the hand that had called her home. Never, baby. Never. Discharge brought fragile peace, but the fracture widened. Juniper, convalescing, confessed over broth. I need space, Mom. Portland with Lark. Start fresh, without ghosts. Paisley's heart tore, but she nodded, pride a bitter bomb. Go. Build your world. This one's always dockside. Packing commenced, boxes labeled with dreams. Sketchpads to Oregon rains. Maeve helped, her presence steady, but whispered to Paisley at night. She's leaving, but you're here. With me. Paisley clung, their bodies a refuge, but dawn's light revealed the hollow Juniper's room echoing empty. The betrayal's apex. A final letter from Harlan, conceding the estate but enclosing Beatrice's journal, pages dog-eared. Paisley, my river, raise her fierce. Love her as I loved you. Juniper read it tear-streaked, hugging Paisley last. You're my mom. Blood or not. The truck pulled away, taillights fading to red points, leaving Paisley on the porch, Maeve's arm around her waist. Tantrums of grief followed. Paisley raging at the river, hurling stones till arms ached. Maeve's patience a kiln firing her resolve. The town shifted slow. Apologies trickling in, the pantry reopening doors. But loss lingered, a low ache like tides retreat. Winter whispered in, frost etching windows, and Paisley walked the levee alone, Maeve's hand now habit. One evening, journal in pocket, she sat where Beatrice had confessed, the water murmuring absolution. We survived, she whispered to ghosts. But survival's edge was sharp, and the current still pulled, toward healing or deeper unknowns. Word count. 1001. Part 6. Winter clamped Monroe in iron, the river icing at edges like veins congealed, the land holding breath against spring's thaw. Juniper's absence carved canyons in the house, her room a shrine of half-packed shelves, sketches pinned like flags of surrender. Paisley moved through days on autopilot. Mending orders sparse but steady, mornings with Maeve's coffee steaming on the sill, her laughter a slow mending plaster over cracks. They built quiet rituals, Potter's will turning to folk tunes on the radio, walks where Maeve's stories of Asheville witches wove spells against loneliness. The town transfigured gradual, scandal's heat cooling to embers. Harlan retreated to Savannah boardrooms, his petition ashes in Delphine's files. Evelyn sold Cypress Hill to a preservation trust, the deeding over with a clause for public gardens. Beatrice's iris is eternal. Riley's exposés rippled wider, op-eds in the Atlanta Journal questioning Southern sacraments, a tentative rainbow flag fluttering at the community center. Mrs. Hargrove even dropped a pie at the door, rhubarb tart and apology unsigned, but Paisley ate it anyway, the crust flaky with forgiveness half-earned. Letters from Juniper arrived weekly, postcards inked with cityscapes, Portland's bridges arched like promises, Lark's poems transcribed in margins. Mom, the rain here's like tears that clean miss you but flying high. Paisley replied volumes filling gaps with river lore, Maeve's vase photos, glazed twins one for Oregon. Video calls bridged miles, Juniper's face glowing on screen, studio chaos behind. Easels and espresso, Lark strumming off-key hellos. When you visiting? Juniper pressed and Paisley promised soon. Booking tickets in secret for spring bloom. But grief's undertow pulled sly. Nights, Paisley traced Beatrice's journal by lamplight, words blurring with whiskey's warmth. Paisley, if I go, know you were my wildest stroke. Maeve found her once, dawn pale, and drew her to bed without words. Body speaking what tongues faltered, slow, sacred, a reclaiming. You're not her echo, Maeve murmured post-dawn, fingers lacing. You're the whole damn symphony. Paisley believed it in light, doubted in dark, the push-pull of love's ledger. Awakening came piecemeal. Volunteering deepened at the pantry, now a hub for marginal voices. Queer youth groups meeting in the back, sharing zines inspired by Junipers. Paisley facilitated, her stories sparse but seeds. Love's not a debt, it's the river carving free. Maeve's gallery opening in March drew crowds, her exhibit currents. Vessels shaped from river clay, etched with queer lore selling swift. Paisley stood proud in the corner, wine glass in hand, toasting the woman who'd taught her hands could shape without breaking. Spring swelled the river, dogwoods exploding pink against green, and Paisley flew west, Maeve at her side, tickets a graduation gift for Juniper's showcase. Portland unfolded misty, craft breweries and book nooks a balm to southern scorch. Juniper met them at the airport, hug bone-crushing, Lark trailing with a welcome mamas-in-law. The loft buzzed. Canvases of marsh mermaids, poems pinned like stars. At the gallery, Juniper's pieces commanded walls, narratives of blood-bound women breaking chains, one titled Mom's Lantern, a silhouette of Paisley against stormlit oaks. Tears fell amid applause, Juniper's acceptance speech a river run. This is for the women who raised me from womb to wild, for secrets shared, and those still swimming upstream. Paisley in the front row clutched Maeve's hand, heart full to bursting. Pride, yes, but release, the girl's flight no abandonment but extension. Dinner followed at a rooftop bistro, city lights winking below. Toasts to futures unscripted. Juniper leaned in, voice soft. I get it now, Mom, why you hid. Not fear but fierce. Protecting the bloom. Return to Monroe brought clarity's flood. Paisley sold the old Victorian, too haunted, too hollow, pooling proceeds with Maeve for a cottage nearer the marsh, walls whitewashed, studio added for wheels and needles. They moved in solstice, summer solstice sun gilding the unpack. Boxes labeled hours. The river view stretched endless, Heron sentinel, and Paisley hung Beatrice's journal on the mantel, open to a blank page, and they thrived. Juniper visited Labor Day, Lark in tow, the cottage filling with their chaos, barbecues smoky with ribs, bonfires where stories circled like sparks. One night, under meteor shower, Juniper pulled Paisley aside, journal in hand. Read this last entry. Paisley will be the mother I couldn't, fierce free. You did, Mom. We all did. Hugs dissolved boundaries, Maeve and Lark weaving in, a tapestry of chosen kin. The human thaw deepened. Paisley testified at town hall for inclusivity ordinances, her voice steady. Weave rivers of regret here, time to let 'em run clean. Votes tipped narrow but tipped, rainbows tentative on porches. Maeve's classes at the co-op drew Juniper's ilk, young artists fleeing Bible belts, hands in clay finding form in fracture. Yet by Kitsch's echo lingered, a minor chord in major key. Harlan's obituary arrived fall, heart attack in a club chair, legacy liquidated to debts. No grief but reflection. Cycles broken, not bloodless. Paisley visited his grave unbidden. Weeds choking marble, whispering, rest. Rivers forgive if you let him. 2 years on, Juniper's graphic novel launched, Lantern Rivers, a semi-autograph of their saga, Beatrice immortal in panels of passion and peril. Book tour took her south, signing in Monroe's library, Q snaking past Hargrove's pie stand. Paisley watched from afar, Maeve's arm linked, heart swelling at strangers murmuring, heard the story brave. Ket Tuk Kong Phi bow tied neat, but open as delta, paths diverging to seas. Juniper settled Portland permanent. Wedding lark in a courthouse with magnolia sprigs shipped south. Paisley officiated via video, vows exchanged under rain that cleansed. I do, Juniper said, eyes on screen, to the woman who called me daughter. Paisley and Maeve aged into rhythm, gray threading hair, hands veined like tributaries. They traveled New Orleans jazz haunts, Vermont maples aflame, collecting stories for Juniper's sequels. One dawn on their porch, river murmuring below, Maeve asked, regrets? Paisley traced her wedding band, simple gold from a Brunswick jeweler. None. Love's the flood, drown or drift. We drifted free. The message etched deep. In towns divided by class and creed, love defies dams. Not with hammers but persistence, carving canyons to oceans. Mouthwan Xe Hoy yields to human tide, slow but inexorable. Paisley Whitaker, once guardian of ghosts, became steward of graces. Her girl's call of mom, the truest inheritance, echoing eternal over waters that never forget. And in Monroe, under oaks eternal, the river ran on, carrying secrets to sea.